All right, looks like we're recording. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's the weekly SIG Docs meeting. Today is December 1st, and it is 12:30 Central, 10:30 Pacific. I'm Jim Angel, and let me turn on my video here, that might help. I'm Jim Angel, I am one of the co-chairs of SIG Docs, and let's kick this thing off. So before getting started, are there any new contributors joining us or folks new to the call who care to introduce themselves?
Hi, my name is Rolf. I'm a senior tech writer at Red Hat, and I work on the OpenShift build and logging teams. And I heard about you at KubeCon, and so here I am.
Awesome. Welcome. Happy to have you.
Hi, my name is Breda McColgan, and I work in IBM, and I attended a talk that Brad gave several months ago. It's taken me till now to actually join one of your meetings because it's quite late in the evening for me. I'm based in Ireland. I was a tech writer for many years. I have been a tester for the last several years, but I'd like to get back into writing. So one of the delays along the way was that I wanted to learn a bit about Kubernetes before I started to help out on this project. So I've done a course in that now. So I'm here and hope I have some time to help. I'm going to turn my video off. It's no, I have small children running around. That's why I'm going to turn off the video again. But hello, everybody.
Awesome. No problem. Great meeting you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, for the folks that are new, who just joined or who are new to SIG Docs, feel free to ask questions. I don't know if you found it or not yet, but there is a Kubernetes SIG Docs Slack channel. That's probably the #1 place to get help, to get feedback. And there's so many nooks and crannies to docs, to the way we approach the release cycle, the way we actually manage and deal with documentation in the Kubernetes open source project. But there's no way you can really learn everything all at once. So I encourage asking questions, interrupt me. You know, I want to make sure folks get the most out of these weekly meetings, as well as anything we can do to help out on Slack. Did I lose everybody, or is it just my internet?
We're still here.
Still here.
Still here.
Cool. I think it might have only froze up on my end. Not a problem at all. I'll move along while everyone else is frozen. It's okay. This week's PR Wrangler is Tim Bannister. Thank you, Tim. Tim, I know you've pulled double duties over the KubeCon break or over the Thanksgiving break as well, so appreciate that. And then next week is Damini, and I don't recall if I've heard from Damini in a while. Has anyone here on the call chatted with Damini in the past, I guess?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of nothing. I will follow up with Damini to make sure that everything is on track there. And for the folks just joining us, and we're talking about the PR Wrangler, just to give some context, the PR Wrangler is a scheduled approver for the SIG Docs repository. And so this approver for the repository is scheduled for that week to go through and triage, approve, review, assess PRs. The entire goal is to keep up the velocity of PRs that we're merging and the response time from SIG Docs. Moving on to the agenda here, release 120. Is there someone from the 120 release team who would like to give us an update?
Sure. This is Kristen. And so we have 3 open PRs for 120, and they all are needing action from the PR owners. Anna was very proactive and DM'd all those PR owners. So we're just awaiting action on their part. The docs merge deadline is end of day tomorrow, December 2nd. And the Dev 120 branch is healthy and was synced last week.
Awesome. Would we say that we're green now, yellow?
Yellow to red.
Gotcha. And probably more so red if those 3 PRs don't take action before end of day tomorrow. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, tomorrow
What I
morning,
would
if we
say-
still don't have any action on those PRs, feel free to, raise up some stink in SIG release, SIG docs, and see what we can do to light a fire under that.
Sounds good.
I think a couple of those PRs, they could merge as is and get fixed post-release, which is not ideal, but it will unblock things. And then I think one probably wants like a fix.
Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. And it'd be great not to have to merge it as is if we can't get responsive PR owners. You'd like to think that if we're having a new enhancement or a new a requiring feature going into Kubernetes, at least the documentation PR owner could be responsive enough to address feedback. But that's my personal opinion on the matter, I guess.
There's definitely been a lot of pinging on those those last stragglers, and yeah, it's pinging, DMing, slacking, commenting on the PRs themselves. So any ideas for the next release are definitely welcome.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea for the retro. And I recall, I don't know if it was Celeste that brought this up, and I don't mean to throw you under the bus, Celeste, if it wasn't, but I recall talking a little bit about having documentation owners, or maybe Anna, maybe it was you that brought this up, but we were talking about potentially having each enhancement owner having a docs, point of contact for the next release, which might be handy.
Yeah, Celeste actually brought it up, and I actually wrote it down in the 1.20 retro documentation. So it's gonna be discussed there, and I think Celeste will join me there, hopefully, and we
I know,
can talk
sorry,
more
I've
about
been like
it.
very heads down for the past month, which is not ideal for the release, but yeah, it's how to divest the docs release process of cat herding, I think, is probably a big process improvement to make.
Cool. Yeah, definitely agree. And it sounds like we're already underway there, so appreciate that. All right, moving on. Any updates from the blog? Heard a whole lot of nothing. I'm going to take that as double thumbs up. Everything is fantastic. Blogs are great. Things are
I
rolling.
think that's an ambitious. I know there is one article waiting for steps to move it forward, Jim, and possibly. I don't know actually. Like if it's very likely there'll be some blog articles around the release. So I think we might need to look at additional people to be doing blog reviews and moving those forward.
Cool.
Anyone on the call?
Yeah,
Is this someone who likes reviewing blogs, and is this someone who's for whom blogging is an interest?
Yeah, Chris Metz here. I'll take a look at those blogs.
it looks like Rolf raised his hand as well.
Cool. And oh, I've lost the agenda. Please put me at the end of that list as well, Jim.
Cool, will do.
We might need to make some ownership changes, and I will pick up considering that.
Ownership changes in the document or for blog?
As in, yeah, changing the PROW concept of ownership and approval for blogs, as well as also inviting people to join in less formally.
Gotcha.
So if you're relatively new here, a lot of Kubernetes uses a tool called PROW. PROW is very opinionated about how it decides what merges and so on. It is essentially the part I'm thinking of is essentially a set of rules. But as well as having those rules, there's absolutely there's room for people to contribute by providing less formal reviews, and rather than approving things, simply providing feedback to blog authors. So there's room for approval contributions, and there's room for every other kind of contribution too.
Awesome, definitely. Yeah, let me know if you need help with that, but that sounds good to me, and it sounds like a great starting point as well for folks who are new.
If you're very new and you haven't seen this, the blog articles will be labeled area/blog.
Yep, yeah, thank you for that. All right, moving on to issues and PRs. So the one that came to my mind was the Google Season of Docs PR. This is the one that was created as part of the Google Season of Docs by Philippe Martin. This, to give some context on this, we generate our API reference documentation using scripts and things that goes, basically scan through source code and compile these documents. And what we look to do is leverage something like Swagger, that we could actually go in and leverage the existing APIs as opposed to the technical source code for documentation, and being able to generate those on the fly. So it's no longer a manual, grab the source code, run this tooling, PR the generated docs, make it so it's a little bit more of a living, breathing, self-updating animal, if you will. Now, one of the challenges that we face is that not every one of our tools that we write documentation for or generate documentation for has a complete specification for the Swagger API spec. So to generate everything on the fly can't be done today. We can generate some of the components there, and that's really what the work that has been done for the API reference PR that I linked in the agenda. And so we're at this kind of split road here where the Google Season of Docs is now coming to an end. This PR is, I would say, and this is a total ballpark number, is around 80% feature complete, but it's lacking that additional 20% of a full solution for generating the documentation here. So the conversation ultimately became potentially merge this in at that 80% effort, as well as iterating on top of this. Basically, we're up against the deadline of Google Season of Docs. Is it smart to move this forward? And I know there's some different opinions on that. I know this came up last week at the APAC meeting as well, is more of a word of caution about, hey, let's not merge this in if it's not feature complete. And I'm curious, I'll open up the floor for discussion or further context on that. I haven't been too incredibly close with this PR itself.
Sorry, I'm eating cookies. The question I have is, so is it not being 100% feature complete a result on our end as a project because we don't have all the Swagger API specs available? Or is it a result of like there are just features that have not been built out as a part of the Google Season of Docs project?
I believe, and I could be completely wrong about this, I believe it's related to the tooling that we're generating the reference docs from. I think the API is one of the stronger ones that works well with Swagger, but I think some of the other tools might not. And that's more of an open source Kubernetes repository or organization issue potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, so having worked with Swagger before, it's always a bit cumbersome at first because it's YAML, so you're not really specifying anything like concrete really or validating it in any like legit way, because it's supposed to be a little bit freeform, so we can't really be feature complete without having the Swagger specs available for all the things, but we are feature complete for the API itself.
My take on this,
yeah,
and I mentioned this in the documentation, is that, well, actually I haven't made this explicit, is that we should look at merging the tooling and accepting the tooling as a work in progress, but we should not at this point merge the work, the PR that's there to demonstrate the tooling. But I think we are very near to being able to take the tooling and actually use its output. I think we're not quite there yet. There is a little bit of challenge as well around if we change the URIs for things, we are committing, URIs in documentation get bookmarked. And so we want to be a little cautious there as well. But I'm really keen to get the tooling PR merged.
I think that sounds interesting to me, Tim. I think the other approach is maybe forget about all the things that are not currently in Swagger, because that's outside of our control as a group, get the demonstration PR of the tooling, get like effectively the theme component and the output component, get that to a place we're happy with, and say we've done the API. The API is in a place we're happy with, and perhaps a subsequent season of docs starts tackling some of these other tools, because that's going to involve communication with a lot of the different SIGs to say, hey, if you would like us to do this shiny thing for you, we need you to start outputting data in a format that we can read in. And that's going to take some time.
Yeah, and in addition to that too, while we're in this limbo, while people are making the transitions, if we do have documentation we provide today that's generated, that's a different script that needs to be managed, maintained, the technical debt that's associated with the previous lingering process. It seems like, I would say every 3 to 4 releases, something major happens in the code base as far as way things are documented or new changes, new enhancements, new features, what have you, that ultimately has us going and you know, kind of mucking a little bit with the reference docs tools. So this is something else to be considering. The other piece too that I'm not sure of is what the Google Season of Docs criteria is for successful completion of it. This would be probably the lowest priority reason to merge this as is, but I want to make sure that, you know, if somebody signed up to do Google Season of Docs, had an outlined set of deliverables, that, you know, the reason that they can't fulfill it is clearly or explicitly defined and acceptable for Google Season of Docs, whatever that may be. There might potentially be a success criteria where this is merged, not merged, but potentially represented in this preview link PR or something similar to that. But this is more details in the Google Season of Docs thing. And really what I'm trying to get at is explaining the kind of two pulling forces here. Like, we want to wrap this up. Google Season of Docs is coming to an end. We're nearing a release cycle. We're not quite there, but we're not sure if we're going to get over that hump in that same time frame. So finding out a solution that makes the contributors happy, makes the K website repository happy, and also doesn't cause a lot of pain for the wider end users of Kubernetes.
I think if that's what we want to do, then I think that Tim's suggestion is probably the best one, which is I think we can for sure take the tooling. And I think if we merge in the tooling, we can say, like, really, you gave us like the hard essentials here. And then I think it's about like scoping out kind of what we want the output to be and to look like, and like how we could potentially expand it in other ways.
What might happen with that is that soon after the 1.20 release, we will open development for 1.21. Maybe 1.21, that branch has the new generator on it.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable to me.
In the notes.
Yeah, Tim, would you mind leaving a comment with that feedback if you haven't done so already? And then the other piece too, I think this would be more for Anna and future, you know, docs release leads, is just knowing that this process is going underway, you know, some sort of informal Slack handoff or knowledge transfer there, as far as, you know, I don't want to lose this information in between two releases. I know we're, you know, coming up next week, I think, is the release date of the new Kubernetes release. So just making sure that we can carry this over into the next release cycle, and also make sure there's nothing blocking the current release cycle as well for the generated docs. Cool. So that sounds all reasonable. I know Zach had mentioned potentially considering merging it in the next 48 hours or so. I like Tim's suggestion as far as, you know, doing the least amount of damage, getting the tooling or the quote unquote hard part into our documentation or our repositories. If for some reason that I'm not aware of that we do need to actually merge this or whatever, we can definitely carry this conversation over into Slack. But that seems very reasonable to me for sure. Any other questions or comments on the Google Season of Docs API reference generation? All right. Moving on to Celeste. This is from, I think it's 3 weeks ago now, or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
This is an update we pushed off, and then we had a bunch of KubeCon and Thanksgiving and whatnot. So the floor is yours.
Okay. So, updates from the naming working group. We have a recommendation in for removing the word master and choosing control plane whenever possible. Asterisks, because we've already found at least one exception to that rule, which is a tutorial that references MySQL / MariaDB, in which case it makes a lot more sense for us to use the replacement terms that MariaDB and MySQL are using, which they're going with primary replica. So it's not going to be like a blanket search and replace of the docs that we're doing here by any stretch of the word. It'll be a little more context specific than that. On that note, there are 2 issues open, one in K website, one in K community. The German and Japanese translations are most definitely still using master instead of control plane. So after this meeting, what I'm going to do on those 2 issues is leave a comment saying, hey, we have a recommendation. Please change this on your own schedules for the localizations. So FYI, that work is going to be starting to happen, which is super cool. As a follow-up to this, we're looking at kind of some of like the edge cases around master. And one of the edge cases around master was an issue opened by Tim, on renaming the master branch to live. So in general, we're trying, I think, to prefer main because that's what GitHub has decided to move towards. So tell me more, dear Tim, tell me more.
Well, they hadn't decided when I wrote that.
I know. Do you still feel strongly about live?
No. The reason,
Okay.
I chose live because to emphasize that this is actually the live site.
Mhm.
But I think it'll just confuse people given there is a community consensus on another name. And when I say community consensus, I mean Microsoft has told us it's going to be main.
One must obey the Fang overlords. Yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to hear too. And I agree, it'll confuse people otherwise. So why confuse people? But yeah, the next step I think is going to be, well, at least something I'd like to see with the working group naming, and we'll see how it goes. Is to start moving slightly lower risk, lower CI integrated repositories to using main, because it seems like GitHub's promised rollover has not materialized yet because it's December and it has not happened yet. And compared to, say, Kubernetes, which runs like a massive suite of tests on every PR, Docs is both a prominent repository, but a fairly low risk one comparatively. So yeah, that's a recommendation that I'm going to be taking back to them, and we'll see if we feel like rolling those dice. Thank you very much. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you. Sounds good to me. And let us know if we can help with any of those changes. All right, moving on to Brad. You want to mention there's a cube localization meeting not showing up on your calendar as appropriate?
Well, at least on my calendar, it keeps showing up at the 11 a.m. Eastern Standard. It should be 1500 UTC, which, with the daylight savings thingy should be 10 a.m. And so if it's just me, that's fine. If it's just folks, but I think for the international folks, they would probably be okay, hopefully. But I know you tried to change over to a UTC calendar. I didn't know if you wanted to try and delete the invite and redo it and see if that worked. I just figured I'd mention it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate bringing that up. I think it'd be worth, sorry, I'm trying to look at my calendar and talk here. I think it'd be worth confirming with at least 1 or 2 other folks to make sure that the issue is, for everybody and not just your own calendar. And the one thing I wanted to do here is, let me just copy this link in chat here, is if folks are able to, I'm going to send this link in chat. That's a link to the SIG Docs, I guess, quote unquote, official calendar that I've shared out with the leads, tech leads, and the co-chair leads as well. And what I've been trying to do is, before we had a lot of personal folks managing different invites, and it is a little crazy. So it's kind of like deal with some pain now than to have pain later. What we ended up doing is changing some of the meeting invites, putting them all on a single centralized calendar. Did the same with the localization working group. And then this is a little bit of a fallout from adjusting the times to be UTC. So I had mine on my calendar here, shows up local at 8 a.m. Central. And I thought that it was before 9 a.m. Central, and then with daylight savings time went to 8, or is it some other time before?
So I just went into that calendar, and for me, it shows up at 11 a.m. at 11 a.m., which is Eastern, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be 10 a.m. because it's 1500 UTC. So
Gotcha. Now, I think what happened is with daylight savings time, your clock switched to the meeting jump because it's locked to UTC.
I didn't understand that. What happened?
So in the actual invite itself,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to look, I don't know if you can see the edit options or not. I can share my screen here. Is that it's using the UTC time, so I can set it to whatever local time. So I have it at, or not local time, I have it at 4 p.m. UTC time, which would be 1600. You said it should be 1500 UTC?
Yeah.
We can make that change right now then. Yeah, so that sounds like it was my mistake that when creating it, I created it at the wrong time. So let me fix that right now on the main one, and I apologize for the noise y'all will get.
That's okay.
So you want 3 p.m. 1500 to 4 p.m. UTC.
Yep.
All right. Easy as that. Appreciate you bringing that up.
Nope, no problem.
All right. Cool. So yeah, you should get that email here shortly. It should update and click over. And now if you're to go to that link, you'll see now it's at the bright and early time of 9 a.m. Central.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So next up on the agenda here, had an update last week from some of the folks in the Chinese localization. And it came up about the same issue. I feel like we're kind of beating this dead horse. The localization subgroup is also focusing on is how do you keep up with content that has changed? And in this case, it's not so much from upstream, what has changed in the main branch, but what this is coming from is the Chinese localization group will scan their GitHub repository looking for the time modified on certain files. And the time modified would indicate when they need to update certain files, which files have already been updated to match either the current release. And I could be a little hazy on all of the details here, but essentially they use the timestamp of the repository to know what the old documentation is and what needs to be updated. And what they've had happen is with documentation, occasionally we'll have folks come by and just do a quick typo PR or a single one-liner PR fix. And I think it's a great way for folks to get started. I encourage small contributions. I think it's a great gateway into contributing. I don't think you should only do typo fixes, but I think that it's a very welcoming path to contributing to documentation. And so the ultimate problem here is somebody starts to contribute to the Chinese localization or any localization, and they make a PR for a typo fix and it gets merged in. Now that modified time for that document is up to date, but the document itself might be, years out of date or many release cycles out of date. So the suggestion came up more about potentially saying if somebody goes and PRs a single typo fix for a localization commit, that there might be a general rule of thumb or recommendation to say, please, review the entire page for accuracy, for content, for freshness, and maybe there's some guidelines around there. But I wanted to raise this up. If anyone has any other suggestions, experience with this, ultimately I suggested to bring it up with the localization working group or sub-project to track it a little closer, but I'll leave it at that. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
It definitely seems like a great topic for our upcoming meeting. So I don't know. I mean, spot on.
So I wonder, I'm just trying to think. Okay, so in the world of like when you're working in a company doing this kind of translation, you like contract this out to a translation service, and you're usually using like a platform with built-in tooling that will track line by line whether something changes, because you are typically charged by the word for a translation. So there's like actually quite advanced tooling for this kind of thing, but it's typically very expensive, and I like don't really think yet, maybe this is a future thing, I don't really think we want that kind of overhead in our lives. So I wonder if like the essential problem, I think, is the translation teams don't know whether a change is significant or not. Like that's, we're trying to track significance.
And that it obfuscates other things, right? So if they make the typo, then they've really obfuscated some really important information, right, Celeste?
Yeah. And I think if you look at like checking through the whole page instead of just doing one typo fix and like maybe changing some grammar here and there, maybe rewording some sentences, like that's just the same problem on a different scale, right? You still have a lot of minor changes that for a localization don't really merit retranslating a page, but might show up as like a 10 or 20 line change kind of in the Git history. Like, I wonder if it's a front matter thing. And I think I've brought this up before, where it's like, if you make a major change, like you update a date field in the front matter saying like, maybe the front matter is like the last major change is on date X. Like like we define what a major change would be, for example, like if you're adding a whole new topic, or if the page is gone completely stale and you had to rewrite 2/3 of it, like that would be a major change, and that maybe is something that the tool can flag for. I don't know. I'm spitballing.
I think the idea of people putting a manually entered date in the front matter is a good idea, and I've seen that kind of human decided date be a valuable information before.
But
I am up for people logging an issue to implement that feature, and we can look at how long it takes to pick that up. I worry that it might be a while.
That's the other thing too, is it becomes like another thing to kind of like, for example, if you're doing a release cycle where every change is probably a major change to the documentation, then it becomes like,
Oh, you
it
need a
becomes-
robot to tell you when you've missed it.
Yeah.
It seems like you're putting in more work of the type that could easily just be forgotten or ignored and then lead to more chaos, would be my fear.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
it be
yeah.
would it be possible? I mean, and this is just for, it sounded like the actual problem scenario was somebody's doing a typo fix to a Chinese, already translated Chinese page, correct? Was that the original problem statement?
Correct. It's more like someone does a flyby PR for just a quick typo fix in Chinese localized documents or documentation. And then like the new release cycle, for example, happens, all new pages, all new content. And they want to look and see what's not been updated versus what's been updated in the master branch. But they have to compare the two of those. And one looks like it's updated a little bit sooner than maybe it truly has been.
I mean, perhaps they could just change their processes to defer all the typo PRs to a special typo iteration or something, and really just focus on what they're specifically translating. I don't know.
So here's what I want. I want the next localization meeting. What I want to happen is that at the end of it, there is a user story. As a localization contributor, I want a tool that X so that Y. And if that story is in an issue, I will take a look at the issue.
Well, I mean, are we ready to jump to, I mean, a user story is good. I'm just curious if there's a way to resolve it without needing a tool.
I have the answer. I just want to make sure that my answer matches what people want. And I'm not going to say what people want.
That's
Well, no.
delightful.
Okay, I got to really process that. So Jim, do you know who brought the issue up that you could maybe mention that they should bring it up and put it on the agenda for the next localization meeting, just so we know where this came from? And because usually,
yeah, and you know Ming, he's the one who brought it up. So mentioned I bring it up at this weekly meeting. It does sound a lot more appropriate for the localization group to
Oh,
deal
sure.
with, but I wanted to raise that up for sure.
Okay, so chiming. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll make sure that let's try and get that on the agenda, because I would have, yeah, I would have. The Chinese team has been so advanced with the localization and using some hashing and some other techniques in their tools. I'm surprised this is coming up, but
Yeah, no
Good topic.
worries. And
Hmm.
yeah, and if you want to copy and paste that block that we just talked about in here and just give some context at the next meeting, I think that would be sufficient for sure.
Fantastic. Yeah, good idea.
Cool, thank you.
Mhm.
Moving on, is Kohei on the call? I'm not sure if he added this and then went to bed or looks like, yeah, we might not have Kohei here. So I took a look at this. It says, please do not approve localization PRs before confirming each language owner. And so looking at this PR, it looks like one of our approvers went through and approved it. And really, this is just raising awareness, saying that if it's a pull request for a different language or localization, make sure that there is an additional localization representative to either do a looks good to me, LGTM, or an approved before actually going through and approving it as an English approver or another localization approver. So not a big deal there, just raising awareness. And moving on, Savitha had written this and asked me to read it out, is that the SIG Doc sub-project is planned to meet on December 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern for the first time. So that is a Thursday. And they'll be focusing on improving documentation as it relates to Kubernetes security, creating a security hardening guide, CKS materials, and so on. So if you're interested, please come and join them. There is a mailing list linked in the agenda. And once you subscribe to the mailing list, you'll get invites to the calendar as well. So if folks are interested in security and documentation, that is a great group to get started with. There's also a Slack channel there you can reach out to. Cool. And lastly, we've got a few more minutes here. Jeffrey, I'm sorry to do this to you. If we want, we can push it to the next meeting. If you think we can cover it in a small amount of time, we definitely can.
I'll cover it in a small amount of time. At the last quarterly meeting, we discussed making videos for the new contributor experience. The first draft of the first video for that is ready. I sent an email to the mailing list. It's, yeah, obviously the first video is going to be kind of a component of a series, so it'll make more sense when we have that finished. But if you have feedback on the structure of the video, how it's laid out, if you think anything's unclear, send me a response in Slack, by email, and I'll fix it. So look forward to getting feedback on that first video.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for doing that. And I'm sorry that your email got held up in moderation. I went through and made sure it was released this morning.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And with that, we have about 10 minutes left here. Does anyone else have anything they would like to discuss? You're in a whole lot of nothing. I will give y'all 9 minutes back on your evening. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Talk to y'all later.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.